Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf. It's the beginning of October, and though that means it's time to look back on September and tell you my tops and flops of my September reading. In other words, the best and the worst of the books that I've read in September. And as always, we start with the best reread. I'm trying to reread more in 2019, and it's not going that badly, I have to say. So, the best reread in September was a classic, Anne Bronte's. Can you see that? Yes, it's reflecting a little bit. Anne Bronte's The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, published in 1848. I read this book as a buddy read together with Terry from Miss Terry B. Leave a link to her channel down below. I'm not sure whether she will post a review or not, but you should check out her channel nevertheless. I read this book a long, long time ago in German. I'm still counting it as a reread because I read it, I don't know, maybe 40 years ago or something. Couldn't remember the first thing about it, but I know that I read it in German. But anyway, so I count it as a reread, even though it's not really a reread. But who cares? I make the rules. The book is set in 1827, but told many, many years later by one of our main characters, Gilbert Markham. And he writes a letter to a friend of his telling him about a certain time in his life. So that the whole book is actually a letter, and within that letter, 2/3 of the book are diary excerpts. Gilbert meets a young woman, Helen, who is the tenant of Wildfell Hall. She seems to be a widow. She has a young child. And Gilbert is very intrigued by her. He falls in love with her, but she refuses him, and people are gossiping about Helen's past. And then, like I said, in almost 2/3 of the book is Helen's diaries, which she gives to Gilbert to explain her past. And then we learn that she was married and that her husband was drinking and was treating her badly. And she left him to seek refuge at Wildfell Hall. I really enjoyed the book mainly because of the diaries, I have to say, because I think it was very unusual for that time when the book was published in the mid 1800s to get a female perspective of a marriage and what it means to be unhappily married to a husband who treats you very badly and you can't really do anything about it. So I thought that part was the part that I really liked, that engaged me, and that I thought was very, very interesting. I've read Agnes Grey before by the same author and didn't like it, but this one I can certainly recommend if you want to check out Anne Bronte, maybe for Victober, because it's now already October. This was the best reread of the month. The next book is the category, a book that surprised me, and the book that surprised me the most. And that is a German book that I read, Angela Lehner, Vater Unser, Our Father, or, it's a part of the prayer. And the book was published in, I'm so distracted by the German title. The book was published in February of this year, and it was longlisted for the German Book Prize, the Deutsche Buchpreis. Didn't make the shortlist, but I read it nevertheless, together with Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventure and Amelia. Amelia doesn't have a booktube channel, but I'm sure many of you will know her because she is a very regular commenter. And the book surprised me because, first of all, when I read books from the German Book Prize list, most of them is just not my thing. And the premise of the book is we follow our main character, Eva 30-ish and 20-ish woman who gets admitted to a psychiatric hospital, and her brother is also in the same hospital, and then you get this, yeah, psych ward story, and I don't know. It's not a book that I would have thought um, um, would engage me that much, but it did. I mean, it was a brilliant debut novel. I thought the way Ava was portrayed as a completely unreliable narrator till the end. We don't know what really happened with her, why she was in admitted involuntarily to that psychiatric hospital. We don't know what really happened to her brother, and the spiraling of getting more and more delusional was done so brilliantly that I just couldn't stop reading the book. I'm not going to talk longer than that because most of you don't read German. If you do, please pick up the book. And for the rest of you, I just hope that it will be translated. The next book, the third one in the tops, is a new release, and that is Jessica Frances Cain, Rules for Visiting, published earlier this year. The book was recommended to me by Sean, from Sean the Book Maniac, and he posted a review already. I will leave a link to his review down below. Jessica Frances Cain is an American author. She lives in New York, and she publishes short stories and nonfiction and novels. I've never heard of this author ever before, so without Sean, I probably wouldn't have read the book, which would have been a shame. So thank you, Sean. So this is my first, experience with her. Rules of Visiting follows a 40-year-old gardener, May. She is a gardener for the university, so she, is into gardening, obviously. And she decides she gets extra holidays for some reason that I explain in the book, and she decides to visit friends that she has sort of fallen out of touch with, friends from high school or college, who live elsewhere. One lives in London, and she decides to take that time, this extra holiday, to visit those friends. That's a big part of the book, the visiting events, how that goes, and how the experience is. But a big portion of the book is also about May's life. She lives with her widowed father. We learn about the death of her mother, about the estranged brother who lives in California. May and her father live on the East Coast, and a lot about trees. Her father wants a tree planted when he dies. He's in his 80s, and there are various possibilities, and we learn about all different kinds of trees, which I thought was really endearing and engaging. But why I thought so much about the book was because of the discussion of friendship in this digital age, how you keep in touch with people, whether it's on Facebook or, through Instagram, what you know about people that you have sort of lost touch with a little bit, how you should keep up friendships, what it means to be a good neighbor. There's a lot of discussion about the neighborhood that May lives in. And even though I have to say, as a novel, it wasn't maybe a brilliant book, because it was a bit too sweet and a bit too happy, Hollywood happy ending-ish, which I didn't like that. But the topics discussed in the book about friendship and about neighborhood and about trees, I finished the book, I think, over a week ago, and I read it in 2 long sittings, and I'm still thinking about it. So if you are interested in these kind of topics, I can certainly recommend Rules of Visiting by Jessica Frances Cain. So this was it for the for the tops category. On to the flops. And the first book I want to talk about is not a bad book, but it was a disappointment to me because I expected more from the book and the author, and that is The Hiding Game by Naomi Wood, which came out in August, I believe, of this year. I read this as a buddy read with Brian from Bookish, and he already posted a review. I will leave a link to his review down below. And even if you're not interested in a review, please check out his channel because he's such a wonderful, wonderful booktuber who deserves many more subscribers than he has as of yet. Naomi Wood is an English author, British author, and she writes historical fiction. This is her second book, and I read the first one, Mrs. Hemingway, which is about the women in the life of Ernest Hemingway. And I really enjoyed this one, that one, the Hemingway book. Anyway, so this book, The Hiding Game, has a dual timeline, is told from the perspective, exclusively the perspective from Paul, who is a painter, and he lives in England, in London. He's German originally, and in the 1980s, for various reasons explained in the book, he looks back at his time being in the Bauhaus school. Now, the Bauhaus was a movement in Germany, an art movement with a school founded among others by Walter Gropius, a famous architect. So between 1922 and the 1930s, the Bauhaus was a new art movement in Germany, and it's still very influential from the style and architecture and so forth. Bauhaus was first situated in Weimar and then moved to Dessau and then to Berlin. Paul was a student there starting in 1922, and he tells us in retrospect the experiences in that school with a group of friends, especially two friends, Charlotte, who is a young female artist from Prague, and Walter. Those are the two main characters in this group of friends of six. And this book was a disappointment for me for various reasons. First of all, I thought the setting in the 1920s up to the mid-1930s in Germany, that was such a historically such an important time and place, and I felt that Naomi Wood did very little with it. She also did very little for me with the quote-unquote real figures of the Bauhaus, because all the main characters in the book are fictional. There's a little bit of one or two painters, actual painters of the Bauhaus that we learn about in the book, but it's very, very little, and that was a disappointment for me. I thought the story that was told about this friendship and this group of people, there were a lot of topics sort of, touched upon lightly, but not developed in any depth. So the book was not, like I said, bad, but it left me dissatisfied in the end. Which is a shame because, like I said, I really enjoyed her previous book, and I thought the topic of Bauhaus and the 20s and early 30s in Germany, the rise of Hitler, is such an interesting topic. But in the end, Naomi Wood just didn't do enough with it for me. Brian talks much more extensively about the book, much more detailed. So if you're interested in other aspects of the book, please check out his review. And then, of course, for the flops, there was the Booker Prize. I'm spitting thinking of the Booker Prize. I posted reviews already for all four of the books written by female authors on the shortlist. So I'm not gonna, talk long about that kind of disappointment. I just want to direct you to two videos in particular, and that is Margaret Atwood's book, The Testaments, the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, which I thought was just so incredibly bad that I couldn't believe it. And the other book that I just posted a review last Sunday is Bernardine Evaristo's book, Girl, Woman, Other, which I had such high hopes for and which turned out for me to be a real disappointment, unfortunately. Anyway, so these were my tops and flops for the month of September. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Talk to me down in the comments, as always, about these books or the books you read in September, and I will see you all soon in the next one. Bye-bye.